Rosa was an elderly woman with soft gray hair and tired eyes who had lived a quiet life filled with routine and patience. She had spent most of her years in a small town where streets were narrow and neighbors once waved from their doors. Her house stood at the end of a calm road with pale blue walls and a wooden porch that made gentle sounds when someone stepped on it. That house was not expensive or grand, but it carried her whole life inside it. Rosa had moved into that house when she was young. She had painted the walls herself and planted small flowers near the door. Over the years she watched seasons change from the same window. She cooked simple meals in the small kitchen and sat every evening with a cup of tea as the sun slowly disappeared. After her husband passed away, the house became quieter, but it never felt empty to her. It still felt safe. As time passed, Rosa's body became slower. Her legs hurt when she walked for long, and her hands shook when she held small things. She tried to manage on her own, but it became harder each year. Her only son had died many years ago, and there was no close family left. Neighbors helped sometimes, but they had their own lives. One day, a social worker visited her and spoke gently about safety and care. The worker said Rosa would be more protected in a nursing home. Rosa did not like the idea, but she felt pressure and fear. She agreed because she believed it was the right thing. When Rosa left her house, she locked the door carefully and kept the key close. She told herself it was only temporary. She believed her house would wait for her like it always had. The nursing home was large and clean, but it felt cold to her. The walls were white and the hallways were long. The air smelled of cleaning liquid and silence. Rosa was given a small room with a bed, a chair, and a window. She placed her photos near the bed to make it feel familiar. Days at the nursing home followed the same pattern. Meals were served at fixed times and lights went off early. Rosa often sat by the window watching the sky change colors. She missed the sound of her porch and the smell of her own kitchen. Some staff members were kind and smiled at her. Others were always in a hurry and spoke quickly. Rosa felt invisible most of the time. She kept her documents and letters in a small drawer beside her bed. Those papers were important to her because they connected her to her life outside. One afternoon, Rosa noticed her drawer was slightly open. She clearly remembered closing it earlier. She checked inside and saw that some letters were missing. Bills, notices, and papers related to her house were gone. At first she thought she had misplaced them. She searched slowly, but they were nowhere to be found. Rosa asked a nurse about the missing papers. The nurse replied calmly and said not to worry. She said things were handled by administration. Rosa nodded, but her heart felt heavy. That night she could not sleep well. Her thoughts moved in circles and fear quietly grew inside her. A few days later, Rosa overheard two workers talking near the door. They spoke about files, ownership, and sales. They stopped talking when they noticed her listening. Rosa did not understand everything they said, but her chest felt tight. She felt something important was being decided without her. More days passed, and no one explained anything to her. When Rosa asked again, she was told to rest and trust the system. She tried, but her mind refused to stay calm. She remembered her house standing alone and silent. She imagined strangers walking through her rooms and touching her things. One early morning, Rosa woke up before sunrise. The nursing home was quiet and the hallway lights were dim. She sat on her bed and held her house key in her hand. That small piece of metal reminded her of who she was. She realized that if she stayed silent, she might lose everything. Rosa stood up slowly and packed a small bag. She took a warm sweater, her old photos, and her house key. Her hands trembled, but her decision was firm. She did not feel like a weak old woman in that moment. She felt like someone protecting her life. She waited patiently and listened to the sounds around her. When she noticed a delivery door left open, she moved carefully toward it. Each step required effort, but she did not stop. Cool morning air touched her face as she stepped outside. Her heart was beating fast, but she felt free. Rosa walked slowly to the bus stop and waited. When the bus arrived, she climbed inside and sat near the front. She held the rail tightly as the bus moved. She watched familiar streets pass by and memories returned with each turn. As the bus approached her neighborhood, Rosa noticed something unusual. She saw a small crowd and bright signs near her street. Her heart began to race. When she stepped off the bus, she felt weak for a moment, but she kept walking. Rosa stopped when she saw her house. A large sign stood in front of it with bold letters announcing an auction. Strangers were standing on her lawn talking and pointing. Some looked excited and others checked papers. Her porch, her door, her windows were all there, but the feeling was different. Rosa felt shock spread through her body. Her knees felt heavy and her vision blurred. For a moment she wanted to turn away. Then she remembered the nights she spent in that house and the life she built there. A deep strength rose inside her. She held her bag tightly, straightened her back, and took a step forward. Rosa knew she could not stay silent anymore. Whatever was happening was wrong, and she would not allow her life to be taken without a voice. What she chose to do next would surprise everyone watching. Rosa stood at the edge of her lawn and watched strangers walk across the grass she had watered for years. Some people spoke loudly while others checked their phones and papers. A man held a clipboard and spoke with confidence as if the house already belonged to someone else. Rosa felt a deep pain in her chest, but she did not step back. She walked forward slowly until a few people noticed her. Their voices lowered as they looked at her worn shoes and simple clothes. One woman whispered to another and pointed toward Rosa. Rosa stopped near the porch and placed her hand on the wooden rail. The familiar touch gave her strength. Rosa spoke in a clear, calm voice and said that this was her house. A few people looked confused and one man laughed softly, thinking she was mistaken. The man with the clipboard stepped closer and asked her name. Rosa told him her name and said she had lived here for decades. The man checked his papers and shook his head. He said the house was listed under a legal process and would be sold today. He said the owner was unable to manage the property and debts had forced the sale. Rosa listened carefully and felt anger rise inside her. She told him she never agreed to sell her house. The man replied that the documents showed approval from a care facility. Rosa realized then what had happened. Someone had made decisions for her without her voice. Her hands shook, but she did not lower her head. She told the man she was capable and present, and that this auction was wrong. A small crowd gathered closer as they listened. Some people looked uncomfortable and others curious. Rosa reached into her bag and pulled out her house key. She held it up and said she had never given it away. She said her home was taken from her while she was locked away and silent. The man hesitated and looked uncertain. He said the auction could not stop without proof. Rosa felt fear, but she also felt determination. She looked around and saw an older neighbor standing near the fence. The neighbor recognized her and walked forward with surprise on his face. The neighbor spoke loudly and confirmed that Rosa was the true owner. He said he had known her for years and that she never planned to sell. Another neighbor joined and said the same. Their voices added weight to Rosa's words and the crowd grew quiet. The man with the clipboard stepped aside and made a phone call. Rosa waited near the porch holding her bag tightly. Memories flooded her mind as she looked at the door and windows. She remembered painting the walls and fixing the porch boards herself. She refused to lose it all. While waiting, Rosa felt tired and leaned against the railing. A young woman from the crowd offered her water. Rosa accepted and thanked her softly. The kindness reminded her that not everyone was against her. Some people were beginning to understand her pain. After some time, the man returned and said the auction would be paused for now. He said the situation needed review. Some people in the crowd looked annoyed while others nodded in support. Slowly people began to leave and the lawn grew quieter. Rosa felt relief, but she knew this was not the end. She understood that stopping the auction for one day was not enough. She needed answers and protection. She sat on the porch steps and rested for a moment. Her body was tired, but her mind was sharp. A local official approached her and asked what happened. Rosa explained everything from the nursing home to the missing papers. She spoke honestly and clearly. The official listened carefully and said this matter needed investigation. He suggested she visit the local office the next day. As the sun moved lower, Rosa unlocked her door and stepped inside her house. The smell of old wood and memories wrapped around her. She walked slowly through each room, touching the walls and furniture. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled softly because she was home again. That night Rosa slept in her own bed for the first time in months. The bed felt familiar and comforting. Though fear still lived in her heart, she also felt hope. She knew the coming days would be difficult, but she was ready to stand for herself. Early the next morning, Rosa woke up with purpose. She dressed neatly and placed her documents on the table. She planned to gather proof and speak to the right people. She would not allow silence to take her life again. As she stepped outside, she noticed neighbors watching from their windows. Some waved and smiled. Rosa felt supported and stronger than before. The quiet, elderly woman had found her voice, and she was not done yet. Rosa walked toward the local office with slow steps but a strong heart. The building was old with wide stairs and tall windows. She held her bag close and reminded herself to stay calm. Inside the office, people moved from desk to desk carrying papers and speaking quietly. Rosa waited her turn and watched the clock move slowly. When Rosa was called, she sat across from a woman with glasses and a gentle voice. Rosa explained everything again, from the day she entered the nursing home to the moment she saw her house marked for auction. She spoke clearly and did not rush her words. The woman listened carefully and took notes. Rosa showed her house key and the few papers she still had. She explained how letters went missing and how she was never asked for permission. The woman nodded and said the situation was serious. She told Rosa that no property should be sold without clear consent. Rosa felt hope grow inside her. The woman made several phone calls and asked Rosa to wait. Rosa sat quietly and watched people pass by. She felt tired, but she refused to leave. After some time, the woman returned and said an investigation would begin. She said the auction process was officially stopped until everything was clear. Rosa thanked her and stood up slowly. As she left the office, she felt lighter. Outside, the sun was bright and warm. She breathed deeply and felt proud of herself. She knew this was only one step, but it mattered. Over the next few days, Rosa met with different officials. Each time she told her story again. Some people looked surprised and others looked concerned. Rosa learned that a worker at the nursing home had handled her documents without proper approval. That worker believed Rosa would never return home. Rosa felt hurt, but she stayed focused. She gathered help from neighbors who wrote letters confirming her ownership. One neighbor found an old photo of Rosa standing in front of the house many years ago. Another neighbor brought copies of utility bills with Rosa's name on them. Each piece added strength to her case. News of the situation slowly spread through the town. People talked about the elderly woman who stood up for herself. Some residents stopped by her house to check on her. Rosa welcomed them kindly and shared tea when she could. She felt less alone than before. One afternoon, a young reporter came to speak with her. The reporter asked if Rosa wanted to share her experience. Rosa hesitated at first, but then agreed. She believed her story could protect others. She spoke honestly about trust, silence, and courage. Her words were calm but powerful. After the story was shared, more support arrived. Local groups offered help and advice. A volunteer visited Rosa and helped organize her documents. Another person offered to help with transportation. Rosa accepted help with gratitude, but remained independent in her decisions. Meanwhile, the nursing home contacted Rosa. They asked her to return and discuss the situation. Rosa agreed to meet them, but not alone. She brought a local advocate with her. During the meeting, Rosa spoke firmly and demanded answers. She asked why her papers were taken and why decisions were made without her voice. The nursing home admitted mistakes were made. They said procedures were not followed correctly. Rosa listened and did not raise her voice. She made it clear that respect mattered more than apologies. She told them she would no longer stay there. Days later, official letters arrived confirming that Rosa was the rightful owner of her house. The auction listing was removed completely. When Rosa read the letter, her hands shook and tears filled her eyes. She sat quietly for a long moment and let relief wash over her. Rosa stood up and walked through her house again. This time her steps felt lighter. She opened windows and let fresh air in. She cleaned slowly and placed flowers on the table. The house felt alive again. That evening, neighbors gathered outside her home. They congratulated her and shared stories. Rosa smiled and thanked them all. She realized that her quiet strength had touched many hearts. She was no longer invisible. As night fell, Rosa sat on her porch and watched the stars appear. She thought about the fear she once felt and the courage she found. She knew her life had changed. She also knew there was still more ahead. Rosa promised herself to help others who could not speak loudly. She believed that no one should lose their home in silence. With that thought, she rested peacefully, knowing her voice had power and her story was not finished yet. Rosa woke up early the next morning with a clear sense of purpose. The sunlight entered her room softly and touched the familiar walls. She made tea and sat at the small table where she once planned her days. Her heart felt steady and her thoughts were focused. She knew that saving her house was only one part of a bigger responsibility. Rosa began to receive letters and phone calls from people she did not know. Some were elderly neighbors from nearby towns who had heard her story. Others were family members worried about loved ones in care facilities. They asked questions and shared fears. Rosa listened patiently and answered with care. She realized many people felt powerless in similar situations. A local community group invited Rosa to attend a small meeting. She hesitated at first because she never liked speaking in public. Still, she agreed because she felt her experience could help others. On the day of the meeting, she wore a simple dress and carried her notes carefully. The room was filled with chairs and quiet faces. Rosa stood at the front and took a deep breath. She spoke slowly and clearly. She told them about trust and how silence can be mistaken for weakness. She explained how important it was to stay informed and to keep personal documents safe. People listened closely and nodded. Some wiped tears from their eyes. After Rosa finished speaking, the room filled with applause. Rosa felt surprised and humbled. She did not see herself as brave, but others clearly did. After the meeting, several people approached her. They thanked her and shared their own stories. Rosa listened and offered comfort. She realized that her quiet strength had turned into something larger. It had become a voice for many. As days passed, Rosa worked with volunteers to create a small guide for elderly residents. The guide explained basic rights and steps to protect property. It was written in simple language so everyone could understand. Rosa helped edit every page carefully. The guide was shared at community centers and local offices. Officials praised the effort and agreed to support it. Rosa felt proud but remained modest. She believed the real success was awareness. One afternoon, Rosa received a visit from the same woman who had helped her at the local office. The woman smiled warmly and said changes were being discussed. New checks and rules were being planned to protect residents in care homes. Rosa felt relief knowing her struggle was leading to progress. At home, Rosa slowly repaired small things that had been neglected. She fixed loose boards and cleaned old shelves. Each task reminded her of her independence. She worked at her own pace and rested when needed. Neighbors continued to visit and offer help. Some brought food and others brought stories. Rosa welcomed them all. Her house, once quiet, now felt full of life again. One evening, Rosa sat with a young girl from the neighborhood who liked to listen to stories. Rosa spoke about the past and about standing up for oneself. The girl listened with wide eyes and smiled. Rosa felt hope knowing the next generation was learning. Rosa also took time to reflect alone. She thought about how easily her life could have changed if she stayed silent. She realized that age did not remove her right to choose. She felt proud of the courage she found when she needed it most. As weeks passed, Rosa felt stronger in body and spirit. She walked daily and cared for her garden again. Flowers slowly bloomed near the porch. They stood as symbols of renewal and patience. One morning Rosa received a letter from the nursing home. It contained an apology and a promise of better care practices. Rosa read it calmly and placed it away. Forgiveness came slowly, but she felt peace knowing the truth was known. Rosa continued her days with intention. She helped where she could and rested when she needed. She lived simply but with meaning. Her house remained her anchor and her refuge. As the season changed, Rosa sat on her porch watching leaves fall. She smiled softly and wrapped herself in a sweater. Her journey had not been easy, but it was honest. She knew one final chapter remained in her story, and it would be written with wisdom and calm strength. Rosa woke up on a quiet morning when the air felt cool and clean. The town looked calmer than it had weeks ago. She made her tea and stood by the window for a long time. She watched a bird land near her garden and felt a gentle peace in her chest. Her life still had challenges, but she no longer felt trapped by fear. That day Rosa had an important meeting at the community center. People from different parts of town planned to gather. Some were officials and some were volunteers. Others were families who wanted to learn how to protect their elderly relatives. Rosa did not see herself as a leader, but she understood that her voice mattered now. She walked to the community center with slow, steady steps. A neighbor walked beside her to make sure she was comfortable. When Rosa entered the room, she saw many faces looking at her with respect. She sat near the front and listened as the meeting began. A local official spoke first and explained that new steps were being created for care facilities. He said there would be stronger checks before any property decision could be made. He said residents must be informed clearly and must have fair support. Rosa listened with a calm expression, but inside she felt strong satisfaction. The pain she faced was not wasted. It was creating change. After the official spoke, Rosa was invited to speak again. She stood up slowly and looked at the room. She saw elderly people sitting quietly with hands folded. She saw younger family members who looked worried and tired. She saw volunteers who were ready to help. Rosa took a deep breath and began. She spoke about dignity and choice. She explained that growing older should never mean losing control of life. She reminded everyone that paperwork matters, but respect matters even more. She said silence does not mean agreement. She said many elderly people stay quiet because they are tired or afraid, but they still understand what is happening. Rosa asked the room to always listen and always ask clear questions. The room was quiet as she spoke. People nodded and some looked emotional. When Rosa finished, many clapped and a few stood up. Rosa felt her cheeks grow warm, but she kept her face calm. She sat down slowly and held her hands together to steady herself. After the meeting, people gathered around Rosa. Some asked for advice. Others thanked her for speaking. A man approached her and said he had ignored his mother's concerns before and he now felt ashamed. Rosa listened and told him it was never too late to do better. Her words were gentle but direct. As Rosa prepared to leave the community center, a woman walked up to her with a small envelope. The woman introduced herself as a legal helper who supported elderly residents. She said she had been watching Rosa's case and wanted to offer something. Rosa opened the envelope and found documents for a special protection plan. The plan was simple and helpful. It allowed Rosa to name trusted people for support while still keeping her own decision power. It also ensured that any future property action would require clear proof of consent. Rosa felt relieved. She had won her house back, but she also needed long-term safety. She thanked the woman and agreed to complete the plan. Later that afternoon, Rosa returned home and sat on her porch. The sun was warm and soft. She looked at her garden and noticed how the flowers had grown stronger. She thought about her own life and saw the same pattern. Pain had pushed her to grow, but it also made her stronger. A few children ran past her yard laughing and playing. One of them stopped and waved at Rosa. Rosa smiled and waved back. In that simple moment she felt connected to life again. She was no longer a forgotten person sitting behind a window. She was part of the town. In the evening Rosa received a surprise visitor. It was the young reporter who had shared her story earlier. The reporter thanked Rosa again and said something important. The reporter said other towns were now talking about creating similar protections because of Rosa's story. Rosa listened in silence for a moment. She did not expect her struggle to travel beyond her street. She felt humble and quietly proud. The reporter asked what Rosa wanted most now. Rosa thought carefully before answering. She said she wanted peace, but not the kind that comes from silence. She wanted peace that comes from fairness. She wanted elderly people to be seen and heard. She wanted families to learn patience and care. She wanted people to remember that an old voice still carries truth. After the reporter left, Rosa walked inside and placed her new documents in a safe place. She organized her papers neatly and labeled them clearly. She wrote down important phone numbers and names. She created a small folder that she could carry if needed. Each step made her feel more prepared and secure. That night Rosa cooked a simple meal and ate slowly. She listened to the quiet sounds of her home. The house no longer felt like a fragile thing that could be taken. It felt protected by her awareness and by the community around her. Before bed Rosa stood in her living room and looked around. She saw old photos and familiar furniture. She touched the wall gently and felt gratitude. She had fought for her home, but she had also learned something valuable. She learned that courage can exist even in tired bones. She learned that speaking up can change more than one life. Rosa went to her bedroom and lay down with a calm mind. Outside the wind moved through the trees. Rosa closed her eyes and felt a deep quiet inside her. Not the quiet of loneliness, but the quiet of safety. She knew the town would remember her story for a long time. But most of all she knew she would remember her own strength.